As my n increases, what's going to happen to my margin of error? If I have more to sample from, I'm more accurate, which is going to narrow it. If my n decreases, that means my margin of error, what? So n works inversely with margin of error. If n gets bigger, your margin of error gets smaller. If n gets smaller, your margin of error gets bigger. This one, yours says confidence interval width. So how do my confidence interval width and margin of error relate? They're tied together. So if my margin of error gets smaller, what's going to happen to my width? So basically this bottom line works the exact same way as the top line.
They have this width.
Now, if I have a higher confidence level, what's going to happen to my margin of error? If my confidence level gets bigger, margin of error is going to what? And I'm 90% sure the temperature between 10 and 100%. Which means that bottom one is also going to be up. So if I get a lower confidence level, what happens to my margin of error?
And when it says like lower or higher confidence level, does it mean like the width like longer?
This means the
Oh
percent.
no, that's the point at the end.
This one, if I go from like 80 to 90,
Then
is what I
it's
mean there.
like something.
No. If I go 80% to 90% is what I mean by this.
Why would the margin of error increase the more confident?
So like if I am 20% sure that the high temperature day is going to be between 65 and 70. But I am 90% sure that it's going to be between 10 degrees and 100 degrees. That's the way I always remember it.
Same.
The more confident I am, it's just going to get really big. So like I am 20% sure that the temperature is going to be between 65 and 70. We'll say 65 and 67. But I am 90% sure. I'd be a lot higher than 90% sure. It's going to be between like 20 degrees and 90 degrees. So as this gets wider, that means my percent got higher.
Or then would it as n increases the
This is not talking about n.
but like I know, we go back.
I don't think.
If n increases with the other stuff, wouldn't it increase too?
No, because
I guess you can be more confident with the smaller things.
these are on top. This is what we talked about the other day. These are on top, so they work directly. This is the denominator, so it works indirectly, inversely.
What do you mean?
So like, if I make this bigger, my margin of error gets bigger. Like this whole thing. If I make this bigger, my margin of error gets bigger. But because this one's on the bottom, it works against it.
So if you make it okay, gotcha.
And sometimes this makes more sense to people, and sometimes this makes more sense to people, whichever way you think about it. Alright, so then if I have a higher standard deviation, same thing back to that, what happens to my margin of error? It what? Increases. Because that was not in the denominator. So if I have a lower standard deviation, it would make it smaller. It all comes back to these are, whichever one you're using, in the numerator. This is the denominator. It all comes back to that same idea of directly or inversely. Alright, number 5 says, so this is when I used to give a quiz. Oh, we're not doing the quiz. Number 5 says, write out a list of similarities versus differences. We literally did that in our notes. I don't need you to rewrite it. I just mean, hey, know it, because when I used to give a quiz, it was on there. Let's not do number 3. So that gives you, which is more than I would usually do, 1, 2, and 4 with 15 minutes of class and homework. What kind of problem is number 1? You should not take more than 10 seconds to tell me what kind of problem number 1 is. In general, very, very generally, what kind of problem is number 1? Force step. What is number 2? Force step. What is number 4? Solving for a sample size. So they are very, very different. Number 1 and number 2 ask you to actually compute or find or give the confidence interval. Number 4, what's your wording? That's your key wording there. How large a sample? So you've got 2 4-step and a how large a sample. I would probably go ahead and knock out number 1 right now because you've got to plug in numbers and use calculator and then be done with that end of it. Which also means, what does number 1 not give you? So what are you actually gonna have to do for number 1 that you guys probably don't want to do? You have to make a what? Instagram.